Greetings, colleagues. My name is Joseph Olwen. I work with NABES in this course. We intend to share the basics in terms of the terminologies. We intend to share an in-depth of a proposal development processes, but also different fundraising cycles that can be essential to us, that can support us in doing our fundraising in our respective organizations, but also try to understand how can we prepare ourselves and benefit from various fundraising opportunities, or how can we build relationships with donors and strengthen the way we do fundraising. We have different categories. We have grants, we have tenders, we have investments, and we have donations. When we talk of grants, what comes into our mind is the biggest category of fundraising that most non-government organizations do benefit from. And we see most NGOs are used to grants and are familiar with grants and various donors who offer grants. But you realize that the grants that many NGOs receive also have different challenges. For example, we have challenges of time consuming, especially when it comes to reporting requirements. You realize that as part of various donor requirements for receiving and utilizing grants, you have to report, let me say, on an agreed periodic basis. If it's a financial report, you must show how the funds have been used. If it's a narrative, you must be able to explain how you've been able to implement using the funds to enable you to achieve the outcome that you intend to do. But donors also at times in different grants do not pay all overheads and costs that are required to implement quality programs. A tender is a type of funding which occurs a fixed sum of funding for a particular fixed outcome that you have planned for, but it also gives you freedom to implement. It gives you implementation freedom as opposed to grants. It enables a significant expansion within the organization if you look at investments as a particular funding category. But the disadvantage is that profit must be generated to repay an investor, which is also a challenge. And also most NGOs are legally restricted from accepting investments, so it may not work for many NGOs. And also the owners of investments also normally exercise some category of control. And the other type of funding I want to talk about is donations. We see many charity organizations, international, benefiting from donations, small-scale donations, from different people. People sign up online and they pay online, make some small-scale donations. We see the advantages in that donations usually don't have a lot of reporting requirements as opposed to grants, and also for an organization, it's normally for an organization and not the project, okay, which is actually good. The disadvantage with the donations is that the cost of obtaining donations can be very high, okay. You can invest heavily in doing publicity of your work and your organization to create awareness and entice people to make donations. Our next session is on donor relations. It's about connections. You should be able to recognize that there are 4 stages to effectively approach donors. You need to identify the elements of each stage. You need to know what each stage consists of, and you need to realize how to overcome obstacles at each stage. need to understand and why to engage the entire organization to develop donor relationships. I'll begin with brainstorming. The first thing we need to do to list down all the donors that you currently have as an organization. 2, list the donors you would like to have that you do not have. 3, which stage are you currently at with the donors that you have? Or which stage are you currently at with the donors that you don't have? 4, what are the next steps going ahead? 5, what are the barriers stopping you from reaching the next step with your donors? It's a normal brainstorming that you normally go to as you prepare this whole, engagement. It's essential that you understand for each funding agency, 1, the strategies and the priorities of that agency. It's important to understand the processes and the systems that they employ. It's also important to get to know connections within that organization or the funding agency, and also the informal policies. Here it's important for you to understand what areas is the funding agency interested in. Do they have a geographical focus in Uganda? And what is that particular geographical focus? Is it at national level only? Is it in the northern Uganda? Is it in the central? Is it countrywide? It's important.
Or any other country?
Or in any other country, if it is like the Nile Basin. Okay? Do they provide one-off or repeated funding? That is important. For example, some donors have routine cycles every year, every 2 years, every 4 years. Okay? Or even every 6 months. You need to understand that. And also, do they restrict funding to certain areas? I want to talk about relationship maps. We had earlier requested you to do a relationship map whereby you list all donors that you have and all donors that you intend to have. These make up a mix of what we call our relationship map. And in doing so, I would request you to pick one funder from the list you prepared previously. And then you chart all contacts between your organization and that funder. Who has the contact? How frequently will you be contacting? At what level will you be doing it? And what is missing? It's important to create a relationship map and ensure that you create the contacts with all the funders that you need to be in contact with but don't have contact with yet. When you're making progress with a donor, it's important not to get pushy or angry. You may feel a stage is over, but the donor may not agree. If the donor isn't interested, maybe you identified a wrong prospect. Ask the donor, seek to learn more, and then you can move on. If a donor is not moving on to explore opportunities, maybe you don't share an understanding of what each of you can offer. But the advice is that don't push a potential funder, or don't be angry at a potential funder. An opportunity may come later where you may be called upon. I want to talk about elevator pitch. You must always prepare a 30-second summary about the work you do or your organization in order to sell it to a donor. Elevator pitch, talk about your program, your project, your organization in 30 seconds. You have to be clear. You have to say what you can do as an organization. You have to suggest a common interest and end with a question. I'll repeat. Be clear, say what you can do, suggest a common interest, and end with a question. An elevator pitch is so important in fundraising. The first phase I'll talk about is identification. Here it involves a donor understanding what are the development challenges that should be addressed, for example, in Uganda. Okay? It's a kind of high-level engagement. It gives them a picture of what is at stake. And after the identification phase, we go into the preparation phase. This is more focused. Here we see donors refining their objectives on how they will work, to deliver the mandate they need to create the kind of positive change that they envisage in a particular country. They come up with different implementation plans for a particular program that they would intend to implement in a country. Then the other phase is the appraisal phase. With appraisal, it involves review and a compilation of from the other prior phases. Here, the donor normally focuses on compiling everything that was done in the early phases to determine how to proceed and what to pursue going ahead. Okay. It normally has a detailed description of the project and its planned implementation. Then we have the negotiation and the approval. It's an internal funding agency process, not with the potential partners that will be given the funding. Normally with the negotiation and approval, the funding agency obtains the necessary internal approvals to pursue a particular line of programming and strategy implementation in a particular country. And it may also include issuing a procurement notice, a request for a proposal. That is when you see adverts coming on their website, on different internet sites, even in newspapers, inviting potential partners to apply. It may be a request for a proposal, a request for a quotation, a procurement notice, and many others. Then we have the implementation and the supervision stage. Here, a funding agency normally selects and contracts with the implementer, and it normally goes on to be part of the implementation, but only on the aspect of monitoring, but also some seek to guide implementation along the way, while others will have a more hands-off approach. It depends on the strategic way of working with a particular organization. Then the other stage is the evaluation. This process, this is more of a process, the process and requirements for evaluation vary depending on the funding agency. But normally this is done to determine if the intervention that was funded met the objective that was set at the start, or to determine if the interventions, if the evaluation has been done in the middle, if it's a midline, are the interventions online, are they on course to meet the objective targeted ahead? If it's done at the end of the implementation, it's done to determine if the interventions met the objectives. At times, evaluation is done internally by the organization that's benefiting from the funding, or it can be done externally by the funding agency. Some may even require to compile audits, to compile and complete audits, while others require informal assessment. It depends on the on the funding arrangement. Our next phase of the discussion is on key proposal components. As stated earlier, when you are developing a proposal, it is important for you to understand the different key aspects of a proposal. What are these components? What are the standard components that are required by most donors? It is important for you to be abreast with this so that you prepare a quality fundable proposal. We have 6 proposal components that I will talk about. The first is the problem statement. The other is the rationale or the justification of the project. The other is the project goal or the objective. The other are the strategies and the activities. And the other are the results, the impacts, the outputs, and the outcomes. And the last one is the budget. Because of every intervention, you must cost it. I'll begin with the problem statement. The problem statement comes first in a proposal because you have to detail what is the problem ahead. It can be social, it can be economic, it can be of any context as you determine, also based on what you want to address. It comes first before a project document is fully developed, and it normally outlines the problem, it outlines the root causes of the problem, and what are the effects of this problem. Okay, it's more of a problem identification and a problem solving section. I'll go into the rationale. Why do we want to address the problem? In this case, we normally give an explanation about the issue that we want to address. the issue that needs to be addressed by the project and why. We must be able to give evidence, and this evidence must be precise, it must be focused specifically on the problem. We even go ahead and even use quotes. For example, you can use references, you can use data, you can use press articles, you can even use citations for credibility of your examples. And also it's important to reference the work that you've done as an organization, to build on the evidences, to show that you're not starting from zero. It's also important to reference the work of other NGOs that have done similar work in that area. It's also important to reference the work of the government, okay, when you are writing the project rationale. Now, I want to talk about the root causes and the effects. It is necessary to mention the causes of the problem that require a solution. The cause-effect relationship within the problem analysis is very, very important, and it guides us in writing the problem statement and the rationale as well. I want to go to writing project goals and objectives. The principle is clear. The project goals and objectives must be SMART. They must be specific in a way that they need to be clearly linked to the problem statement and the rationale. They need to be measurable to enable you to evaluate and gauge your impact. They need to be achievable or attainable. Okay? For example, if you intend to create a result in 2 years, can it be achieved in 2 years? You have to be realistic also when you're coming up with the objectives, and it should also be timely. For example, a project will take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Okay? And that's the principle, the SMART principle that guides us in setting up the goals and objectives. We also talk about the strategies and the activities. How will your project address the root causes of the problem statement? This is when we bring in the strategies and the activities. What are the activities that we'll undertake to achieve each of the objectives? The results. We have what we call a project logic. Many of us at times call it a logical framework. At times we call it a theory of change. It links the impact, the long-term outcome, it links the short-term outcomes, it links the strategies, it links the activities. As I said, we have output indicators, we have outcome indicators, and we have impact indicators. I will give an example. If, for example, a country X is being faced by climate change, but the government does not have a climate change policy or strategy in place to come up with interventions that will help the communities that are vulnerable to adapt to climate change. What will be the role of an organization like NBD? One, in coming up with a project, we can come up with interventions. For example, we can do a research to document the the impact or the scale of the impact of climate change on the vulnerable communities. And in doing so, our output indicator would be a research report done on the impact of climate change in country X. The other activity would be conduct dissemination workshops to showcase the results that came out of the research. And in doing so, if that is done, one of the output indicators would be one workshop conducted with, let me say, the legislators or the government officials. The other will be a number of government officials or legislators disseminated or that participated in the dissemination session. Now, in terms of the outcome, remember, the reason why we'll be doing such an intervention, one, is to raise awareness about the plight of climate change in country X, and it would also be done, to call on government to pass a climate change, to develop a climate change policy, and then we set a strategy in place to support the implementation of the policy. So, one of our outcomes that we would expect later would expect the government to develop a climate change policy, and strategy which will be implemented. And if that is done, our outcome indicators at that level would also focus on whether a climate change policy and strategy has been put in place to be implemented in a particular country. But it would also look at we would also look at an indicator targeting the government officials or targeting the legislators on passing of climate change legislation, you know, or policy in a particular country. Then the impact indicator is something that is long term. You will not be able to achieve it at a particular time, but you would say reduced prevalence of the impacts of climate change in a particular country X. That may even take 10 years, or it may take 15 years. So that's the whole summary of how the outcome indicators, the output indicators, the outcome indicators, and the impact indicators interact in a nutshell. But remember, for every intervention that we do, we normally come up with risks and assumptions. We always acknowledge that there is a risk in whatever we do, and we must always put an assumption for whatever intervention we are planning. We don't control everything that happens. Some things happen naturally and are beyond our control as human beings. So it's important to identify whether there are certain risks that we can be able to mitigate early, okay? And come up with mitigation measures to avoid the project from stalling. And also, monitoring and evaluation is something I wanted to talk about. Monitoring and evaluation is at the center of implementation of our interventions within NGOs. It's critical for effective implementation. It's important because it gives us a baseline of information at the start of implementation of the project, and also shows us what we need to measure or to monitor, how we shall be able to monitor, to help us keep on track in achieving the outcomes and outputs. This should be used as evidence, okay, as an organization, especially in compiling our reports along the way. The other thing I want to talk about is the budget. For every project that we do right, there should be a budget, because we should have the principle of cost-effective implementation in whatever we do. Okay? The budget should be in line and clearly linked to the activities we are going to implement as proposed in a project. For any project, income should be clearly identified. It's important to utilize any budget formats that can be provided by the donor as long as it's in line with the donor requirements. Yes, the proposal elements, as I said, we have the problem statement, the project rationale or the justification, the project goal and objectives, which have to be SMART. We have the strategies and the activities which must be linked to achieving the objectives. And then we have also the logical framework, which is more of a pictorial depiction of how the overall result or the impact will be achieved. It links the impact to the outcomes, which are the long-term outcomes, the short-term outcomes. It also links the outcomes to the strategies and the activities, and outcomes and output indicators that we talked about earlier. And lastly, we have the budget, which is linked to the activities. But then, remember, proposal packaging is so important. Some opportunities are very specific on a type of writing, and any error you may fall prey to, you're likely to be disqualified. For example, some donors instruct you to include a cover letter, a title page. A title page normally has the project title, the donor agency, the contact info for your organization, the date, the table of contents. Some calls also have an inclusion of a list of contents, and also a summary page, which is an executive summary. All of them request you to number. We have appendices, bibliography or footnotes and endnotes, as sources of information are also important. But also, if you are delivering a physical proposal, it's important to sign and seal the package, and also it's important to document formatting, and design should be consistent. For example, if you're using a particular writing format, if it's Arial, don't do Arial on one page and the second page you do New Times Roman. If you're using one writing style, it has to be consistent and the same. We also have a few notes that I wanted to share on branding, which should be, should be able to create a simple and consistent look for your proposal, unless prohibited by the funder. Simple branding can go a long way. It communicates a professional image. Okay, it makes a link between the organization and the program in the reviewer's mind. But then some writing basics for a proposal also. The basics of a good essay or paragraph essay. 1, tell them what you will tell them. For example, tell them what you will tell them when you are meeting them face to face. Tell them and provide at least 3 supporting elements. And also tell them what you told them.